Millionaire ignores his virgin wife's tears, but regrets it when it's too late. Dear beautiful souls, welcome to Alcott Stories, where love, emotions, and unforgettable journeys come to life. First, I want to say a heartfelt thank you to each and every one of you for watching, supporting, and being part of this incredible journey. Your love and encouragement mean the world to me, and I truly appreciate every like, comment, and share. To my amazing viewers, may your life be filled with love, happiness, and endless blessings. May your hearts always find warmth, your dreams come true, and your days be filled with joy. I pray that love and peace always surround you. And to those who are new here, welcome to the family. If you love heart-touching love stories, deep emotions, and unforgettable romance, then you're in the right place. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another beautiful story. Once again, thank you for being here. Keep supporting, keep spreading love, and I'll see you in the next story. With love, Alcott Stories Heart. The grand ballroom of the Donovan estate was a scene straight out of a dream, lavish, breathtaking, and filled with the intoxicating scent of roses and champagne. The towering crystal chandeliers bathed the space in golden light, casting a glow over the hundreds of guests dressed in their finest attire. Every detail had been perfected to reflect the grandeur of Kian Donovan's world, a world where wealth and power shaped everything, including the woman he had chosen as his wife. At the center of it all, Kian stood tall and commanding, exuding confidence with every glance, every movement. His jet-black hair was neatly styled, his deep blue eyes sharp, yet filled with something rare: tenderness. He was the kind of man women whispered about, the kind who could make any heart race with just a smirk. But tonight, there was only one woman who mattered: Lillian Hayes. She was a vision of perfection, her radiant brown skin glowing under the chandeliers, her hazel eyes sparkling with pure happiness. The white silk gown draped over her delicate frame, hugging her curves in all the right places. The intricate embroidery shimmered like stars, and her long, dark curls cascaded down her back like a waterfall of silk. She looked ethereal, untouched, and utterly mesmerizing. Tonight, she was no longer just Lillian Hayes. She was Mrs. Lillian Donovan, the wife of one of the most powerful men in the city. As the music shifted into a soft, romantic melody, Kian extended his hand, his gaze locked onto hers with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. "Dance with me," he murmured, his voice deep and smooth, sending a thrill through her veins. Lillian's heart pounded as she placed her hand in his touch warm and firm. He pulled her close, his strong arms wrapping around her waist as they swayed to the rhythm of the music. The world around them faded, and all she could feel was him, his strength, his warmth, his love. "You're my forever, Lillian," Kian whispered against her lips, his breath hot against her skin. Lillian felt her heart melt at his words. She had sacrificed everything to be with him, her family, her old life, her dreams, because she believed in his love, because she knew deep in her soul that this was meant to be. And as she looked into his deep blue eyes, she knew she had made the right choice. Or so she thought. The sacrifice of love. Lillian had once lived a simple but beautiful life. She had dreams, ambitions, and a heart full of hope. But loving Kian Donovan meant giving up everything. Her parents had warned her, "Rich men don't know loyalty, Lillian. They take what they want and discard what they don't." But she had defended Kian every single time. "Kian is different," she had argued. "He loves me." She had been so sure. But love, she would soon learn, was never that simple. The promises of a millionaire. As Kian twirled her under the glittering chandeliers, his gaze never left her face. He had fought the world to make her his. He had stood against his family's expectations, ignored the whispers of high society, and broken every rule for her. But deep inside, he knew something Lillian didn't. He had temptations. Temptations he had never spoken about, temptations he had buried beneath his devotion to her. But tonight, as he held his pure, untouched wife in his arms, he felt something shift inside him, something he didn't understand, something dangerous. Kiss. Forever. As the song ended, Kian cupped Lillian's face, tilting her chin upward as he captured her lips in a kiss so deep, so passionate, it sent shivers through her entire body. The room erupted into applause, but all she could hear was the wild beating of her heart. "You're mine, Lillian," Kian whispered, his forehead pressed against hers. "And I'll never let you go." She believed him. She believed in every promise, every whispered vow. And as they stepped into their new life together, she never imagined the heartbreak waiting in the shadows. A heartbreak that would shatter her world. A heartbreak that would change everything. The waves of Santorini's azure sea crashed softly against the shore, their rhythmic whispers blending with the night's gentle breeze. The air smelled of salt and jasmine, the perfect backdrop for a honeymoon drenched in passion. The secluded villa, perched high above the cliffs, was nothing short of paradise, a sanctuary made for lovers. And inside, Kian Donovan was losing himself in the only woman who had ever truly mattered to him. Lillian. She lay beneath him, her warm brown skin glowing like bronze kissed by firelight, her hazel eyes darkened with desire. She was breathtaking, untouched until him, and now completely his. Kian devoured her, his lips tracing the delicate curve of her neck, his hands exploring every inch of her body. Lillian gasped, her fingers gripping his shoulders as he whispered against her skin, "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever touched." She trembled under him, her body arching to meet his, their heat colliding, melting, burning. Their love was wildfire, uncontrollable, all-consuming. The night stretched into endless pleasure, Kian's insatiable hunger for her never fading. He worshipped her with every touch, every whispered vow, their bodies tangled beneath moonlit skies, the soft rustling of the silk sheets the only witness to their unrestrained passion. He was her first, her only. And in those moments, Lillian felt invincible. But love, she would soon learn, was never that simple. The depths of desire. Days passed in a blur of sun-kissed mornings and feverish nights. They explored the island, walked hand in hand along the cliffs, and kissed beneath the golden hues of the sunset. Kian spoiled her endlessly. Private yacht cruises, candlelit dinners, diamonds as radiant as the stars. But the only thing Lillian ever truly wanted was him. And he gave himself to her, or at least that's what she believed, because deep inside, buried beneath his love for her, was a whisper of something unfinished, something he should have left behind. The past that wouldn't die. It started subtly, a lingering thought, a name he tried to forget, Serena. She had been nothing more than a fleeting indulgence, a beautiful, forbidden distraction from a past life, a woman he should have walked away from the moment he vowed his forever to Lillian. But some temptations never die, and some mistakes come back to haunt you. One night, as Lillian slept soundly against his chest, Kian lay awake, staring at the ceiling, battling the demons clawing at his heart. He had everything, a wife who adored him, a love so pure it felt sacred, and yet, why couldn't he shake the ghost of another woman's touch? A single message on his phone would change everything, a message that would threaten to destroy the fairy tale. The city was alive outside, but inside, Kian Donovan's world was silent, too silent. He sat in his sleek black Aston Martin, the engine humming softly as he stared at the message glowing on his phone screen. Celeste Morgan, a name he had erased, a name that should have never resurfaced. But there it was. Miss me? Just two simple words. Yet they held the power to send a sharp jolt of something forbidden down his spine. Kian exhaled, his fingers tightening around the steering wheel. He knew he should delete it, knew he should turn off his phone and go home to Lillian, his wife, his everything. He pictured her, waiting for him in their bed, wrapped in nothing but his silk shirt, smelling of vanilla and innocence. Lillian, his untouched angel, the woman who had given him everything. And yet, here he was, parked outside the Grand Lux Hotel, contemplating the unthinkable. A battle raged within him. Lillian was his wife. His heart should belong to her alone. But Celeste had always been a temptation dipped in poison. And tonight, for reasons he refused to name, he stepped out of the car and walked straight into hell. The moment the elevator doors slid open on the penthouse floor, he smelled it. Celeste's signature perfume, jasmine, and something dangerously sweet. And then, there she was, Celeste Morgan. She leaned against the doorway of her suite, one hand on her hip, her lips curling into a smirk that made Kian's stomach tighten. Platinum blonde waves cascaded over her bare shoulders, her icy blue eyes gleaming with mischief. She was still devastatingly beautiful, still the same sin wrapped in silk, still a mistake waiting to happen. Kian clenched his jaw, his body going rigid. He shouldn't have come here. He wasn't that man anymore. At least that's what he wanted to believe. Celeste stepped forward, her silk robe slipping off one shoulder, revealing a dangerous amount of smooth, creamy skin. "I knew you'd come," she murmured, her voice dripping with amusement. Kian exhaled harshly. "What do you want, Celeste?" She tilted her head, her blue eyes flickering with something unreadable. "What do I want?" she repeated, feigning innocence as she took another step closer. The scent of her perfume wrapped around him, taunting him, pulling him into memories he should have buried long ago. Nights tangled in silk sheets, hot, breathless whispers, the feel of her nails down his back. Number. He couldn't go there. Not when Lillian was at home, dreaming of a future with him. Kian swallowed hard. This was a mistake. Celeste raised an eyebrow, her smirk deepening. "Still loyal to your little wife?" she whispered, her lips brushing against his jaw. Kian's fists clenched at his sides. This was the moment to walk away, to prove that he wasn't the man he used to be, to go home to his wife and forget this ever happened. But then Celeste's fingers traced his chest, her nails dragging lightly over his shirt. Her lips ghosted over his skin, and suddenly his heart wasn't listening. The room was dark, but the temptation between them burned too brightly to ignore. The door slammed shut behind them. Kian didn't remember who moved first. All he knew was that her hands were in his hair, pulling him down, and his mouth was crushing against hers, devouring her like she was the oxygen he had been starving for. Celeste's silk robe slipped to the floor. His self-control followed. She moaned against his lips as he pushed her against the wall, his hands roaming over familiar curves he should have never touched again. This is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. But then Celeste's mouth was on his neck, her body pressing into his, and suddenly the guilt wasn't strong enough to stop him. For the first time since meeting Lillian, Kian let his darkness win. And as they tumbled onto the bed, his hands gripping Celeste's thighs, he knew there would be no going back. Sunlight streamed through the large windows of the penthouse suite, casting a golden glow over the twisted sheets and the tangled bodies beneath them. Kian's eyes snapped open. Regret crashed into him like a tidal wave. His heart pounded as he turned his head, and there she was, Celeste, lying beside him, smirking like she had already won. She stretched lazily, her bare body half covered by the sheets, her blue eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Good morning, lover," she purred. Kian sat up, his hands dragging through his messy hair. What the hell had he done? Lillian, his wife. She had no idea where he was, no idea that while she had been waiting for him at home, wrapped in his shirt, dreaming about forever, he had been here, tangled in another woman's arms. A sharp pain stabbed his chest. This was a mistake, the worst mistake of his life. He needed to leave, needed to forget this ever happened. But then Celeste rolled onto her stomach, propping herself up on her elbows, her smile turning wicked. "You don't look like a man who regrets this," she murmured, trailing a finger down his arm. Kian stiffened. "This was a mistake, Celeste." She laughed softly. "Maybe." She shrugged. "But we both know it won't be the last time." Kian's stomach twisted, because deep down he feared she was right. And soon this one night of sin would cost him everything. The deception began as a single night of weakness. But now it had become Kian Donovan's secret addiction. He lived a double life, balancing between the woman who loved him unconditionally and the woman who ignited a fire in his veins. Days belonged to Lillian. Nights belonged to Celeste. 2 lives, 2 women at home. Lillian was the perfect wife. Every evening she greeted him at the door with a soft kiss, her hazel eyes glowing with love. She still whispered sweet dreams against his bare chest, her fingers tracing lazy circles over his skin before falling asleep. She prayed night after night for the day she would carry his child. She had no idea that he was already creating a family elsewhere. Every night she welcomed him with a smirk, her silk robe slipping off the moment he stepped into the room. She knew how to make him forget everything. Kian told himself it was just physical, just an escape. But deep down, he knew the truth. With every forbidden touch, every stolen night, he was falling deeper into Celeste's trap. Lillian never questioned him. Why would she? She trusted him completely, so when he worked late, she simply kissed him goodbye and waited up, believing he was out, building their future. When he came home, smelling of expensive perfume, he blamed it on client meetings, on business gatherings. And when his phone buzzed late at night, he told her it was just work. She never once suspected that while she lay alone in their marital bed, he was in a hotel tangled in Celeste's sheets. One night, as Kian lay beside Celeste, sweat-slicked and exhausted from their latest sinful rendezvous, she turned to him with a smirk that sent a chill down his spine. "I have news," she murmured, tracing a finger down his chest. Kian sighed, his eyes still closed. "What is it?" Celeste leaned closer, her lips brushing against his ear. "I'm pregnant." The words slammed into him like a wrecking ball. His eyes snapped open, his entire body going rigid. Pregnant? His heart pounded violently as he sat up, staring at her. "That's not possible." Celeste's smirk deepened. "Oh, it's very possible." Untizen felt the walls close in around him. This wasn't supposed to happen. He wasn't supposed to have a child with her. Not with the woman who was nothing more than his secret escape. Not when Lillian was at home, weighing, hoping, praying to carry his baby. Kian ran a shaky hand through his hair. "What do you want, Celeste?" She sighed dramatically. "Relax, lover, I don't need your money." She leaned forward, her icy blue eyes locking onto his. "I just want one thing." Kian's stomach twisted. What? Celeste's lips curled into a slow, wicked smile. You. His blood ran cold. This wasn't just an affair anymore. This was a trap. And Kian Donovan had just lost control of his own game, a baby to hold, to love, to complete the family she had built with Kian. She imagined the joy on his face when she finally gave him an heir, the way he would cradle their child in his strong arms, whispering soft promises of forever. But fate was cruel, because the child she longed for was already growing inside another woman. It was a quiet evening. Too quiet. Lillian sat on the couch, curled up in one of Kian's dress shirts, waiting for him to return home. He had been working late more often, his absences stretching longer, his touch growing colder. She told herself it was stress, that marriage had its rough patches, that he still loved her. Her heart ached for him, for the warmth they once shared, for the family she had prayed for. But that night, fate had other plans. A soft vibration echoed in the silence. Lillian glanced at Kian's phone, sitting on the coffee table. The screen lit up with a notification, a hospital message. Her brows furrowed. Kian had never mentioned any hospital visits. Then she saw it, a sonogram image, and below it, a message that sent her world crashing down. Celeste, our baby is growing strong, Kian. You're going to be a daddy. I can't wait to see you tonight. Lillian couldn't breathe. Her hands trembled as she clutched the phone, her heart pounding so violently it hurt. Baby? Daddy? Tonight? The words blurred before her eyes, her vision swimming with unshed tears. This couldn't be happening. Her husband, her Kian, was having a child with another woman. Lillian's body felt cold, as if someone had drained the life out of her. She tried to move, tried to think, but all she could hear was the deafening silence of her broken heart. She replayed every moment, every night he had come home late, every excuse, every distant kiss, and suddenly it all made sense. The scent of perfume that wasn't hers, the unexplained meetings, the way he no longer touched her with the same hunger. She had been a fool who had loved a man who had been building a family behind her back. The sound of the front door opening snapped her back to reality. She wiped her tears quickly, clutching the phone in her trembling hands as Kian walked in, loosening his tie, his expression unreadable. He barely looked at her. Like a husband returning to a house, not a home. Like a man whose heart belonged elsewhere. "Hey, love," he said, his voice carrying the same forced warmth he had given her for months. Lillian didn't reply. She simply lifted his phone, the screen still illuminated with the message that had destroyed her. "Who is she?" Her voice barely came out a whisper. Kian's body stiffened. His eyes flickered to the phone, the proof of his betrayal staring back at him. For a split second she saw something in his gaze. Guilt, but it was gone as quickly as it came. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair, his silence speaking louder than any excuse ever could. Lillian felt her heart crack in half. He didn't deny it. He didn't even try to lie. And that hurt more than anything, because it meant that somewhere along the way she had already lost him. And now another woman was carrying the future that was supposed to be hers. Lillian sat on the edge of their bed, clutching Kian's phone like a lifeline, the very device that had shattered her soul. The house was silent. Too silent. The walls felt colder, the bed felt emptier, and she felt like a stranger in the marriage she had once called home. The message replayed in her mind like a cruel echo. "Our baby is growing strong, Kian. You're going to be a daddy. I can't wait to see you tonight." Her fingers tightened around the phone, her knuckles turning white. Where was he right now? Was he with her? holding her the way he used to hold Lillian, whispering sweet nothings into another woman's ear? The thought made her stomach twist painfully. It was past midnight when the front door finally creaked open. Lillian held her breath, her heart pounding as she heard his footsteps approaching. She quickly placed his phone back on the nightstand and wiped her tears. She wouldn't let him see her break. Not yet. Not until she found the strength to face him. Kian walked in, looking exhausted, but not the kind of exhaustion that came from work. His shirt was slightly unbuttoned, his hair tousled in a way that didn't belong to a long day in the office. It belonged to someone else's touch. "Where were you?" Lillian asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Her heart pounded as she waited for his response. Would he tell her the truth? Would he at least have the decency to admit the betrayal she had already discovered? But Kian simply sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Work, baby. You know how it is. Work." Lillian let out a soft, humorless laugh. He was lying to her face. She clenched the sheets beneath her fingers, fighting the urge to scream, to throw the phone at him, to demand the truth. But what good would it do? She had already seen the truth written in that message, in that sonogram, in his exhaustion that had nothing to do with work. So instead, she turned away from him. She lay down on the bed, silent tears slipping onto her pillow. Her chest ached, her soul screaming inside her, but Kian didn't notice. Or maybe he just didn't care. Because just minutes later, he crawled into bed beside her, his back turned. Not even an embrace, not even a goodnight kiss. The same man who once worshipped her body, memorized her every curve, and whispered his love against her skin. Now he lay beside her like a stranger. And Lillian knew, in that moment, that she was already losing him. Or worse, she had already lost him. The mansion felt colder than ever. Lillian sat in the dimly lit bedroom, her knees pulled to her chest as she stared at the clock. 3:15 a.m. Kian wasn't home. She'd been waiting for hours, hoping, foolishly, that he would walk through the door, take her in his arms, and tell her she was the only one who mattered. But deep down, she knew exactly where he was, and who he was with. Lillian's phone vibrated beside her. A message from one of her friends. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The photo nearly stopped her heart. Kian, standing in a hospital room, holding a newborn baby in each arm. His face, once unreadable and distant, was now glowing with pure joy. His eyes, which no longer softened when they looked at Lillian, were filled with love for them. Celeste lay in the hospital bed, exhausted but radiant, smiling up at Kian like she had won. And she had, because she had given him something Lillian hadn't. A family. A sharp pain shot through Lillian's chest. Tears blurred her vision as she stared at the photo, her entire world collapsing around her. She should have been the one in that hospital bed. She should have been the one he held close. She should have been the one to give him his first child. Instead, she was alone in an empty mansion, drowning in heartbreak. Her phone vibrated again. Another message. This time from Kian. "I'll be home late. Don't wait up." Lillian let out a choked laugh. He didn't even bother to lie this time. No fake excuse. No pretense of love. Just cold indifference. Her hand gripped the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. She had spent years loving him, trusting him, sacrificing everything for him, and he had replaced her without a second thought. She had never felt pain like this. A part of her wanted to scream, to storm into that hospital and demand answers. But what was the point? The man she had married, the man who had once whispered forever against her lips, was gone. and in his place stood a man who now belonged to someone else. Lillian curled up beneath the thick silk sheets, the same bed where Kian had once worshipped her, where he had promised her a future. Now it felt like a coffin. She pressed a hand to her stomach, her body aching for the child she had dreamed of, the family she had longed to give him. But instead, Celeste had given him everything. And Lillian? She had nothing. Tears slipped down her cheeks, soaking the pillow beneath her. She cried silently, not because she was weak, but because she had loved him too much. And that was her biggest mistake. 2 years, 730 days of silent pain. Lillian never left. She still wore her wedding ring. She still woke up beside him every morning. She still waited at the dinner table every night, hoping he'd come home in time to eat with her. But she wasn't his wife anymore, not really. She was just a shadow now, a ghost of the woman who had once been full of life, full of love. Kian still provided for her. He still bought her expensive dresses, jewelry, things he thought would keep her happy. But he didn't see her. Not the way he used to. There were no more stolen kisses in the morning, no more whispered "I love yous" in the dark. No more laughter, no more passion. He lived in 2 worlds, one where he was the devoted father to Celeste's twins, and one where Lillian was just an afterthought. And she knew it. She felt it every single day. At first, she'd tried. She had begged him to see her again, to love her again. She had worn the dresses he once loved, styled her hair the way he used to adore, prepared his favorite meals. But it never mattered. His mind was always somewhere else. His heart, no longer hers. One evening, Lillian stood on the balcony of their grand mansion, watching the sunset. She used to love sunsets. Now they just felt like endings. As she traced the rim of her untouched wineglass, she heard Kian's voice behind her. "Lillian." She turned slowly, but there was no softness left in her eyes. "Yes?" He hesitated. Something about her cold, detached voice made him uneasy. He had expected the same desperate wife, the one who always waited for him, cried for him, loved him despite his betrayal. But the woman standing before him now, she was different. Something inside her had shifted. For the first time in 2 years, Kian felt something foreign in his chest. Guilt. He had ignored her, neglected her, crushed her heart over and over again, and yet she had stayed. But for how much longer? That night, as Kian lay in bed, he watched Lillian from the corner of his eye. She was right beside him, but she felt miles away. Her back was turned. She no longer reached for him in her sleep, no longer whispered his name. He turned, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in 2 years, he wondered if he had made a mistake. If maybe, just maybe, Lillian was the one he was supposed to fight for. But karma never forgets, and his was coming. The irony of life is that the ones who betray always believe they are untouchable until karma finds them. And that day, karma found Kian Donovan. It was an unusual day. For the first time in years, Kian came home early. Not to Lillian, not to the mansion that now felt like an empty shell, but to Celeste. She had been texting him all morning, teasing him, telling him to come over. "I miss you," she had written, and like a fool, he believed her. He stepped into the luxury penthouse suite he had bought for her, the place where they had spent so many stolen nights together. He was expecting the same seductive smile, the same arms pulling him in. But instead, he found his worst nightmare. The bedroom door was slightly open. Soft giggles filled the air. A woman's laughter, Celeste's laughter. But she wasn't alone. Kian's breath caught in his throat as he pushed the door open wider. And there she was. Celeste Morgan. The woman who had torn his marriage apart, the mother of his children, the woman he had risked everything for. in bed with another man. His body went cold. Celeste lay beneath a man he didn't recognize, tangled in silk sheets that he had paid for. Her perfect red lips curved into a wicked smile as she whispered something against her lover's ear, something she used to whisper to Kian. Kian couldn't move. For the first time in his life, he understood exactly what heartbreak felt like, what Lillian had felt, and it hit him like a punch to the gut. Celeste finally noticed him. She didn't gasp in shock. She didn't scramble to cover herself. She just laughed. "Kian," she purred, sitting up lazily, the sheets barely covering her. What a surprise. Her lover smirked, completely unbothered. Kian's fists clenched, his chest burned with rage, humiliation, disbelief. "How long?" His voice was dangerously low. Celeste stretched, completely unashamed. "Does it matter?" Yes. It mattered because he had destroyed his wife for her. He had given her everything, his time, his attention, his name, his heart. And in the end, she had never even wanted him. "Was anything real?" he demanded. Celeste sighed, her blue eyes sharp with amusement. "Kian, don't be dramatic." She tilted her head. "Did you really think I wanted you? A man who was already married?" The words stabbed deeper than he expected. She leaned forward, her voice like poison. "I wanted your money." A cruel smirk. "Your name. Your power." A pause. "But love, that was never part of the deal." Kian felt the weight of his own destruction crashing down on him. He had left behind a woman who truly loved him, for a woman who had never loved him at all, and now he had nothing. Kian turned and walked away. Celeste didn't stop him. She didn't call after him, didn't beg for forgiveness, because she didn't care. Just like he hadn't cared when Lillian had cried herself to sleep every night. This was karma. And for the first time, Kian understood what it meant to be broken. And for the first time in his life, Kian Donovan felt it burn through his veins. He had been a king, untouchable, powerful, always in control. Until now, until the moment he lost everything. The drive to the mansion felt endless. Kian's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. His mind raced with one thought, Lillian. He needed to fix this. He needed to tell her that he finally understood, that he was sorry, that he loved her, that she was the only one who ever mattered. But deep down, an ugly fear whispered in his chest. What if it was too late? Kian burst through the doors of their mansion. "Lillian!" Silence. His heart pounded as he rushed up the stairs, down the hall, to their bedroom. And then he saw her, packing. A suitcase lay open on the bed, half filled with clothes. Lillian stood beside it, folding a dress, moving with quiet, painful finality. Kian felt the floor beneath him crack. No, this couldn't be happening. Not her, not his Lillian. She turned at the sound of his footsteps. Their eyes met, hazel against stormy blue. But there was no love in her gaze anymore, no longing, no warmth, just emptiness. The same emptiness he had forced her to live with for 2 years. Kian swallowed hard, stepping closer. "Lillian," his voice cracked. She stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, in the softest whisper, a whisper more powerful than any scream, she spoke. "I loved you, Kian." Her words sliced through him. She shook her head, blinking back tears. "I would have died for you." A bitter laugh left her lips. "And you let me die a little, every single day." Kian's knees hit the floor. His powerful, commanding presence, the presence that had once ruled boardrooms, controlled empires, meant nothing now. Because in this moment he wasn't a millionaire, he wasn't a king, he was just a broken man begging for mercy. "Lillian, please, he'll straight tease, so seats." dat ze zei de was biz bakada, but data kitrin say. I'll fix this. I swear I will. She didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't believe him. She simply closed her suitcase, zipped it up, turned away, and in that moment Kian finally understood. He had thought his biggest loss was Celeste's betrayal. But no, his biggest loss was Lillian walking away. And this time, she wasn't coming back. Life had a cruel way of playing with fate. Just when Kian thought he had lost everything, the universe revealed its biggest twist. Lillian walked through the grand entrance of the mansion for the last time. She didn't look back. She didn't hesitate. But as she reached the stone pathway leading to the driveway, her vision blurred. Her heartbeat pounded erratically in her chest. Her breathing became uneven. And then, darkness. Her knees buckled. The suitcase slipped from her grip, and Lillian collapsed. Kian had barely made it to his feet when he heard the thud. His heart stopped. Lillian! He ran faster than he ever had in his life. Faster than when he had chased after deals worth millions. Faster than when he had rushed to Celeste's hospital to hold his illegitimate children. Because this time it wasn't money or regret or betrayal at stake. It was Lillian, the woman he had sworn to love. The woman he had destroyed, and the woman who now lay unconscious in his arms. The drive to the hospital was a blur. Kian held Lillian's cold hand in his heart hammering wildly. "Stay with me," he pleaded, his voice shaking. For the first time he was truly terrified. He had broken her heart. But if she left him now, he wouldn't survive it. The hospital room was eerily silent, except for the steady beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor. Kian sat beside Lillian, gripping her fingers tightly, praying. And then the doctor walked in. "Mr. Donovan," he said, glancing at the chart in his hands, "there's something you need to know." Kian stood, desperate. "Is she okay? What happened to her?" The doctor sighed. "She collapsed due to extreme emotional distress," he explained. Then his eyes softened. "But that's not all. Mr. Donovan, she's pregnant." The words hit him like a thunderbolt. His breath caught. His world tilted. Pregnant? Lillian was pregnant? With his child? Kian felt his knees weaken. He staggered back, gripping the edge of the chair for support. "Are you sure?" His voice barely came out. The doctor nodded. "Yes, she's nearly 8 weeks along." 8 weeks. 2 months. All this time. While he had been drowning in his own sins, while he had been watching Celeste raise his twins, Lillian had been carrying his baby in silence. Kian broke. Tears, hot and uncontrollable, spilled down his face. Fate had given him another chance to love her, another chance to be the man he should have been. But as he looked at Lillian's sleeping form, his chest ached with one question. Did he even deserve it? As Kian sat there, drowning in his emotions, Lillian stirred. Her fingers twitched, her lashes fluttered, and then her hazel eyes slowly opened. Their gazes met. Blue locked with hazel. Pain, love, regret. So much regret. Kian opened his mouth, his heart pounding with everything he wanted to say, but before he could speak, Lillian whispered, "Why are you crying, Kian?" Her voice was weak, fragile, and it shattered him all over again. Kian had once believed that money could fix everything, that power could erase mistakes, that a man like him never had to beg. But when it came to Lillian, none of that mattered. She was gone, and he would do anything to win her back. The day Lillian left the hospital, Kian was waiting. She hadn't spoken much since waking up, hadn't told him whether she would stay, hadn't even looked at him the same way. But that didn't matter. He wasn't giving up. She was his wife, carrying his child, and he was going to prove that he was still her husband. It started with small things. Lillian moved into a separate guest house on the Donovan estate, refusing to sleep under the same roof as him. But Kian was there every morning, waiting with breakfast. She ignored him. He still waited. She slammed the door in his face. He stayed outside all day. And when she finally opened it at night, his deep blue eyes stared at her with so much love, so much desperation, that it shattered something inside her. Kian never left her alone, not in a way that suffocated her, but in a way that reminded her that he wasn't the same man anymore. He took her to doctor's appointments, rubbed her feet when she was too tired to stand, cooked for her, badly. She didn't smile, didn't laugh, but she let him stay. And for Kian, that was enough, because he would wait, as long as it took. One evening, Kian found Lillian standing by the lake on their property. Her hands cradled her growing belly, her expression unreadable. She was so beautiful, so breathtakingly perfect, and yet she wasn't his anymore. He swallowed hard, his voice hoarse. "Do you still love me, Lillian?" Silence. A long, painful silence. And then, a whisper. "I don't know." Kian dropped to his knees, his hands clutched at her waist, his forehead pressed against her stomach. "Then I'll make you remember." Days turned to weeks. Weeks turned to months. And slowly, Lillian softened. She started meeting his eyes again, letting him touch her hand without pulling away, laughing just once, when he burned dinner and nearly set the kitchen on fire. And Kian held on to those moments like a dying man clinging to his last breath, because they meant hope, and he would never stop fighting for her. The moment had finally come. After months of heartbreak, regret, and painful healing, Lillian was about to bring their child into the world, and Kian, for the first time in his life, felt completely powerless. The hospital room was chaos, nurses rushing in and out, machines beeping, Lillian's soft whimpers turning into agonized cries. Kian held her hand, his heart shattering at the sight of her in pain. "You're doing amazing, baby," he whispered, pressing a kiss to her damp forehead. But she barely heard him. Her grip tightened, her body trembled, and Kian felt helpless. For all his wealth and power, he couldn't take this pain from her. All he could do was stay by her side and pray. Then a tiny cry, high-pitched, fragile. Kian's breath hitched, and in that moment, everything else disappeared. A nurse carefully placed the tiny, wriggling newborn into Lillian's arms. She sobbed, pressing a trembling kiss to the baby's forehead. Kian swallowed hard, his chest tightening with a feeling he couldn't explain. Then the nurse turned to him. "Would you like to hold your son, Mr. Donovan?" His son. The words nearly brought him to his knees. Hands shaking, he reached out, and the moment he cradled the tiny, warm body against his chest, something inside him broke. Kian stared down at the perfect little life they had created. The soft tufts of dark hair, the small fingers curling around his. A miracle. Tears blurred his vision as he bent his head and whispered, "I will never hurt your mother again." Lillian, exhausted yet radiant, looked up at him, and for the first time in 2 long years, she saw something different in his eyes. Not just love, not just regret, but a man who had learned his lesson the hard way. And for the first time, she let herself believe, maybe, just maybe, they had a second chance. Kian had lost her once, and he swore to himself he would never lose her again. Lillian wasn't just his wife, she was his redemption, his home, the woman who had taught him the true meaning of love. And this time, he would love her the way she deserved. Kian transformed. Gone was the man who once took his wife for granted. Gone was the man who let temptation destroy his vows. Now he was a husband who worshipped his wife, a father who adored his son. He never missed a single doctor's appointment, never let Lillian lift a finger while she recovered. When their baby cried at night, it wasn't a nanny who soothed him, it was Kian. He woke up early to make Lillian breakfast, left sweet notes on her nightstand, took her on weekly dates no matter how busy he was, because this time she would never feel second place. She would always come first. Celeste tried to call. She tried to use the twins to pull Kian back, but he made it clear Lillian was the only woman in his life. He took care of his children, yes, but he set strict boundaries. There were no more hotel meetings, no more secrets, no more betrayal. Celeste's power over him was gone, because when a man truly loves a woman, no one else matters. Years passed, their son grew, and Lillian glowed with happiness once more. One night, Kian took her to the same ballroom where they had danced as newlyweds, where he had once promised her forever, and then broken it. This time, as they swayed under the golden lights, he whispered, "I will spend the rest of my life making up for the pain I caused you." Lillian looked into his eyes, her heart full. She had once thought she could never forgive him, that the wounds were too deep. But Kian had proven his love, and love, true love, was worth fighting for. She smiled softly. "You already have." And as they kissed, as he held her close, Kian knew. He had been given a second chance at love, and he would never waste it.